February 22nd, 2026. 20 Mexican states are burning at the same time. Buses in flames across highways. Armed convoys rolling through cities. Flights grounded. American tourists barricaded in hotels. Hundreds of deads. A country just shut down like someone pulled the plug. All of it because El Mencho just died. A man the world barely knew existed. So invisible no verified photo existed for a decade. A $15 million bounty that two governments, a Pentagon task force, and the full weight of the post-9/11 surveillance state couldn't collect. His cartel operated in over 40 countries. His men shot down a military helicopter with an RPG, and when the state finally cornered him, he bled out inside one. But it wasn't satellites or special forces that found him. It was his girlfriend stepping into a car on a mountain road. The most wanted man on Earth broke his own rules, and by dawn, 6 helicopters were circling the pine trees above him. But the truly disturbing part isn't how he died. It's what he was before any of this, because he was a cop, a municipal police officer in Jalisco, wearing the badge of the same system he'd spend the next 2 decades dismantling from the outside. How did a deported ex-cop build the most dangerous cartel on Earth? And why was it a girlfriend on a mountain road, not a billion-dollar task force that finally brought him down? California, late 1980s. A teenager from the avocado hills of Michoacan arrives in the United States with no documents, English or plan beyond the next paycheck. The informal economy absorbs him the way it absorbs thousands. Dishwashing, fieldwork, day labor. No credentials required, no questions answered. At first, it's small, street-level drug work, the kind that ends with a brief arrest, a mugshot, and a fine nobody pays. But the market hardens, margins tighten, and by the early 1990s, he's caught inside a federal heroin conspiracy case that is not small anymore. In 1994, he is in the federal court, with a guilty plea and a sentence. And here's the detail that rewrites everything that follows. Because he doesn't learn his most dangerous skills in Mexico, he learns them in America. Prison is sold as containment. You remove a man from circulation. You shrink his world to a concrete rectangle. That's the theory. In practice, prison is a sorting machine. It builds a directory of every driver, every courier, every logistics brain who knows a crossing point by heart. You don't need a Rolodex when you're locked in a cell block with the future middle management of transnational crime. You just need time and attention. America built him a networking summit and stamped it corrections. Inside, he watches how gangs enforce discipline, rules, silence, and consequences. He studies how guards rotate and where they get lazy. He catalogs which men keep their mouths shut under pressure and which ones crack before lunch. He learns the hierarchy of favors, who controls the phones, who runs the commissary, who decides whether a new inmate sleeps safely or doesn't sleep at all. And he absorbs the single most important operating principle of organized crime. Trust is not a feeling. It's a structure. You build it like scaffolding, not like friendship. When he's released, he isn't rehabilitated. He's reorganized. He's deported back to Mexico. No fanfare. No record that follows him across the border in any way that matters. And then, he does the one thing no one predicts. He becomes a police officer. Real municipal police in Jalisco. A badge, a uniform, a radio, a salary. Think about what that means. For the first time in his life, he is inside the machine that hunts men exactly like him. He learns the radio codes, the shift rotations, the way a tip becomes a warrant, the way a warrant becomes a raid, the way a raid leaks 3 hours early because someone's cousin owes someone a favor. He learns which desk slows an investigation and which filing cabinet holds cases that nobody will ever read. He learns which commander chases headlines and which one buries reports to avoid embarrassment. He learns which patrol unit waves a truck through at 2 a.m. because they're tired and it's a Friday and the overtime isn't worth the paperwork. He doesn't have a moral crisis. He doesn't wrestle with what he's doing or why. He studies. Because to him, law enforcement isn't a moral force. It's an operating system. And operating systems can be reverse engineered. So when he steps back into the underworld, into networks tied to the Mencho cartel in western Mexico, He isn't just another man with a gun. He's a man trained by the two institutions that were supposed to stop him, the U.S. federal prison system and Mexican policing. Both handed him blueprints and called it punishment. If you're starting to see how a deported dishwasher turned two institutions meant to destroy him into a personal curriculum, consider hitting subscribe, because the wedding that handed him a financial empire and the helicopter he'd one day die inside haven't happened yet. But there's a ceiling. Cartel hierarchies are monarchies dressed as businesses. Blood matters. Marriage matters. Last names matter. A stranger can be muscle. A stranger can be useful. A stranger almost never becomes king. He doesn't have the right bloodline. So how does a deported ex-cop with no cartel pedigree become the leader of an organization that will one day fight the Mexican military to a standstill and operate across more than 40 countries? He finds the one ladder bullets can't build. A woman named Rosalinda Gonzalez Valencia. And the moment he marries into her family, he stops being an employee. He becomes a merger. But marriage gives you access. It doesn't hand you a throne. So what happens when the cartel world fractures and a man carrying prison networks, police blueprints, and a new last name decides he isn't going to inherit someone else's system? What happens when he decides to build his own? Rosalinda Gonzalez Valencia is not just a wife. She's an on-ramp. Her family controls Los Queenies, described by U.S. authorities as CJNG's financial backbone, an organization purpose-built to launder money and cycle profits back into operations. One analysis in the Mexican press put it bluntly: his rise was premeditated by marriage, a strategic binding of the armed wing to the financial wing, and he had street experience. He had prison contacts. He had police knowledge. What he lacked was legitimacy inside a world that runs on family trees, where a stranger can rise but rarely rule. Marriage fixed that overnight. One ceremony, one new last name, access to a financial network that took decades to build, and then history hands him the exact kind of chaos that creates empires. 2009 to 2010. The Mencho cartel cracks apart. Leaders arrested, allies killed. The old order hemorrhages. You'd expect a loyal lieutenant to pick a side and fight for the dying flag. He doesn't. He does something colder. He studies what worked about the old model, strips out what didn't, and builds a replacement. The organization that emerges is the Jalisco New Generation Cartel. Even the name is a declaration of intent. New generation, not a continuation, an upgrade. And CJNG isn't just another cocaine corridor. It's a vertically integrated factory. Cocaine is imported risk. You buy from producers, move the product, split the margin. Synthetic drugs are internal profit. You control the precursor chemicals. You control the labs. You control the distribution. And the precursors are the key, because you can't cook methamphetamine or fentanyl without supply chains that stretch across the Pacific. CJNG positions itself around routes connecting Mexico to Asia, and one port matters more than any other: Manzanillo, Mexico's largest container port by volume, handling millions of tons of cargo annually, the kind of place where 40-foot steel boxes cycle through customs like pixels on a screen. The U.S. Treasury named it a gateway for precursor chemicals from Asia, dual-use compounds that, with the right lab and chemist, become fentanyl-bound for American cities. The same container that carries machinery parts in one layer carries precursor drums underneath. Same paperwork clears both. A port is not geography, it's leverage. Control that choke point and you don't just move your own product. You control everyone else's options. You become the toll booth on the Pacific. Now stack on the money layer. The DEA describes CJNG using Chinese underground banking networks, cryptocurrency exchanges, bulk cash smuggling, and trade-based laundering schemes. They don't hide cash in walls. They move money like a Fortune 500 company, through invoices, shell companies, and wire transfers disguised as legitimate trade, factory, shipping, and banking. 3 pillars built simultaneously. Most cartels build one and hope the others hold. He built all 3 at once, so that losing any single piece never meant losing the whole machine. And when authorities try to knock one down, Every raid teaches CJNG, which border crossing leaks. Every seizure reveals which official will take a bribe. Every arrest teaches which cousin can take over the books. CJNG also does something most observers miss until it's too late. It franchises. The DEA describes a unique franchise-based command structure where smaller armed groups across different territories operate under the CJNG brand, buy protection, pay tribute, and plug into the supply chain. It's decentralized violence with centralized logistics, and it means that taking out one cell doesn't collapse the network. It just opens a vacancy that another cell fills before the arrest paperwork is filed. By the time the world starts calling CJNG one of the most powerful and ruthless transnational criminal organizations on Earth, it is already operating in almost all 50 US states and more than 40 countries. The box governments built to contain a regional gang now hold something that replicates like a network. So Mexico tries the obvious play: take the leader. In 2015, it launches the largest military operation yet aimed at capturing El Mencho. And on the day the state finally corners him, CJNG answers with something Mexico has never seen before. A cartel shoots down a military helicopter with a rocket-propelled grenade, and the word cartel stops fitting. So what do you call an organization that plans for air power, and what does the state do when every containment attempt only makes the target stronger? And if one wedding was enough to build the most dangerous cartel on Earth, what does that say about every institution that never saw it coming? May 1st, 2015. Federal forces push into Jalisco in what officials call Operation Jalisco. Multiple agencies, ground troops, and helicopter gunships. The logic is straightforward. Pressure him hard enough, and he has to surface. CJNG responds like a military command. First, the roads. Coordinated roadblocks erupt across western Mexico. Burning vehicles, hijacked buses, improvised barricades designed to fracture the state's attention across dozens of fronts at once, then the fire. Banks, gas stations, and businesses. Places that exist to prove normal life still functions, set ablaze to prove it doesn't. Then the moment that changes the war. A military helicopter takes a direct hit from an RPG. Soldiers die in the wreckage. The message is surgical. You are not hunting a gang. You are fighting an enemy that war-gamed your air superiority before you deployed it. And here is the contradiction that poisons every success. The state tries to contain him and accidentally cements his myth. After 2015, El Mencho becomes more than a fugitive inside security institutions. He becomes a legend because he did what no criminal was supposed to do. He met the state head-on, shot down its helicopter, and survived. And recruits start arriving not despite the danger, but because of the story. Every teenager in rural Jalisco who feels invisible now has proof that one man can fight the army and win. Now the arms race accelerates. The government adds armor. The cartel adds heavier weapons. The government adds electronic surveillance. The cartel subtracts electronics entirely. Because another lesson crystallizes: the more the state invests in technology, the more valuable invisibility becomes. CJNG gets louder, he gets quieter. This is the split that most analysts miss. The organization becomes the loudest criminal enterprise in the Western Hemisphere, burning highways, executing rivals on camera, releasing propaganda videos with military hardware. And the man running it vanishes so completely that intelligence agencies start debating whether he's even still alive. The violence is a distraction. His silence is the strategy. 2016. Gunmen storm a restaurant in the resort city of Puerto Vallarta and drag away a son of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. Days later, the hostage is released alive, which is almost worse than a murder because the point isn't killing. The point is reach. CJNG is announcing, we can touch the royal family of the Sinaloa world in public in a tourist town and walk away. The US reward for El Mencho climbs to $15 million. Still, nothing. The DEA runs informant networks. The Pentagon runs signals intelligence. Mexico runs its own parallel operations. They share intelligence on some days and guard it on others, because trust between institutions is its own kind of weakness, and he knows that too. Every agency that hunts him has a different chain of command, a different budget cycle, a different definition of success. He has one: survive. 2020, CJNG is blamed for a coordinated assassination attempt on Omar Garcia Harfuch, Mexico City's police chief, ambushed at dawn in an upscale neighborhood. Heavy automatic fire, grenades. 2 bodyguards die. Garcia Harfuch survives with 3 bullet wounds, and years later sits in Mexico's security cabinet on the night Elmencho's death sets the country ablaze. Each containment attempt becomes a training drill. Each drill becomes doctrine. And the doctrine distills into 4 rules. Don't be where they look. Don't talk where they listen. Don't move unless forced. Operate through terrain and trust in silence. The governments prove they can arrest his family, his son, Ruben Oseguera Gonzalez, extradited and sentenced in the U.S. to life plus 30 years. His financial circle takes hit after hit. Los Quenis lieutenants are seized, prosecuted, and locked away, and he keeps operating anyway. Because the machine doesn't need him present to function. That's the design. Cells activate on instruction, money moves on protocol, and violence deploys on signals. He built an organization that could run without him in the room, which means every arrest of someone close to him is just a test the system passes. The state celebrates each takedown. He watches each one and learns which node failed and why, and how to harden the next one. So the question tightens: how do you catch a ghost who learned invisibility by surviving every net the state ever threw? And if every arrest of someone close to him only made the network stronger, at what point does the state admit the playbook isn't working? The paradox of elmencho is brutal in its simplicity. CJNG's violence is engineered for maximum visibility, with roadblocks, arson, public executions, entire cities thrown into lockdown as a message. But the man who commands it all is nearly invisible. No social media, no intercepted phone calls, no electronic trail. He treats visibility like ammunition, something you spend only when you want damage. And while he hides, CJNG diversifies like a corporation, hedging its flagship product: fuel theft from state-owned Pemex pipelines, tapping directly into government infrastructure, and selling stolen gasoline at discount. Extortion rackets, squeezing avocado farmers, lime growers, construction companies. Human smuggling operations charging migrants thousands of dollars per crossing. Real estate fraud laundering dirty money through property developments. Even timeshare scams targeting American and Canadian tourists on the Pacific coast. The same logic any conglomerate follows: never depend on a single revenue stream, because the day the government interdicts your main product, you need 12 other income sources already running. Then the United States escalates in a way that changes the legal physics. February 2025, CJNG is formally designated a foreign terrorist organization, published in the Federal Register, black-letter law. One word does it: terrorist. That single label unlocks different authorities, different surveillance tools, different risks for anyone who touches the network: banks, shipping companies, couriers, and the polite consultants who know how to move things quietly. It also shifts how the US military thinks about the problem. Counterterrorism is something the Pentagon already has playbooks for. So, in January 2026, a new entity launches, the Joint Interagency Task Force Counter-Cartel, military-led, explicitly modeled on the network mapping intelligence architecture built to hunt terrorist cells after September 11th. Satellites, signals, intelligence, pattern of life analysis, the full weight of the post-9/11 surveillance state aimed at one cartel. And still, the ghost keeps walking. Part of it is discipline. He eliminates electronic communication. He minimizes movement. He operates through rural protection networks in terrain so rugged that drones lose signal and convoys get swallowed by mud. But part of it is simpler, and it's the reason containment keeps failing in the same direction. Institutions are predictable. Police rotate on schedules. Military units redeploy on budgets. Informant networks dry up when funding cycles end. Politicians change slogans every election cycle and reset priorities like they're rearranging furniture. A man who has been inside those systems learns their rhythms the way a musician learns a song and plays the silences between the notes. CJNG also weaponizes perception. After his death, a wave of misinformation floods social media, fabricated images, exaggerated casualty counts, fake reports of government collapse, all designed to amplify chaos and erode trust in the state. That wasn't panic. That was doctrine. If the public believes the government has lost control, the government has already lost the most important battle, the one fought in people's heads. By early 2026, every wall is closing, except around him. A $15 million bounty, a terrorist designation, and a purpose-built military task force. Two governments coordinating at the highest levels. And the break, when it finally comes, arrives from the one direction no intelligence architecture can fully defend. He behaves like a man, and on February 20th, 2026, Mexican military investigators identify a trusted associate connected to one of elmencho's romantic partners. They follow him. A car, a mountain road, a woman. After years of satellite imagery, billion-dollar task forces, and encrypted databases, the thing that cracks the case is a driver taking a girlfriend to a cabin resort. February 21st, she leaves Tapalpa. He stays behind with a small security detail. Now the hunt is no longer theoretical. It's geographic. A cluster of rental cabins tucked into the Jalisco highlands, surrounded by pine forest and the kind of silence that fools you into thinking you're safe. If the last decade taught El Mencho how to survive every trap the state could build, what did it teach the state about finally closing one? And if the most wanted man on earth could only be found because he wanted to see someone, what does that say about every billion-dollar system built to catch him? Before dawn, Sunday, February 22nd, ground forces encircle the Tapalpa resort in darkness. Special operations units, National Guard, Air Force support, 6 helicopters overhead, rotors turning against the cold mountain air like held breath. The operation has been classified at the highest level. No leaks, no advance warning, no margin for the kind of last-minute intelligence hemorrhage that has killed operations before. The cartel gunmen open fire first. The initial clash is fast and savage. Armed men die in the first exchange. Then the old playbook activates, because of course it does. El Mencho flees into the woods with 2 bodyguards, while a rear guard stays behind to slow the advance. Buy time, disappear into terrain, let the state chase shadows. It worked in 2015. This time, special forces push into the tree line anyway, and they find him. Not in a bunker, not in an armored vehicle, not in a tunnel, and the phrase officials use is almost insulting in its plainness, hiding in the undergrowth, in the bushes, like any other man who realizes too late that the map has finally run out of edges. A second firefight erupts in the brush. He and both bodyguards are hit. A military helicopter takes gunfire and emergency lands because even cornered, even bleeding, even finished, his men are still aiming at the sky, still executing the doctrine he drilled into them, target the aircraft. Then the final irony. He is loaded onto a helicopter for medical transport. But the violence his own organization has triggered is already swallowing Jalisco, so the aircraft cannot land safely in Guadalajara. It diverts, and his body is flown onward to Mexico City to prevent any recovery attempt by cartel forces. He dies in flight. Somewhere between the mountains of Jalisco and the sprawl of Mexico City, at altitude, inside the one machine his organization once proved it could destroy. The man whose legend was built on shooting down a military helicopter with an RPG dies inside one, strapped to a stretcher, bleeding out over farmland he once controlled. Containment finally works, and immediately, it doesn't. CJNG does not fracture into confusion. It snaps into coordinated retaliation like a machine executing preloaded instructions. More than 250 roadblocks across 20 states. Burning vehicles stitched across highways to sew the country shut. Airlines cancel flights to Puerto Vallarta. Factories suspend production. Schools close. Roads vanish under smoke. The casualties feel unreal. At least 62 dead in less than a day, according to one tally. More than 25 National Guard members killed in coordinated attacks. Dozens of suspected cartel fighters killed as security forces push back. Other reports put the toll above 70. Then the cartel tries to price a soldier's life. A lieutenant known as El Tuli, allegedly offers 20,000 pesos, over $1,000, for every member of the military killed. A paratrooper brigade tracks him down within hours, kills him in a firefight, and seizes weapons alongside nearly $1.4 million in mixed currency. By Monday, the government announces roadblocks are clearing, flights may resume. The country is stabilizing, but clearing roadblocks is not the same as solving the problem, because the question is no longer whether the smoke fades. The question is, what happens to a franchise empire after the founder dies? Mexico is supposed to host World Cup matches in months. Guadalajara, CJNG's home territory, is a host city. International cameras, foreign delegations, billions of viewers. Meanwhile, the cartel's decentralized structure stares into a power vacuum, while rival organizations, Sinaloa splinter factions, Gulf cartel remnants, local armed groups hungry for territory, begin calculating opportunities, and the systems Elmencho absorbed across 4 decades, prison, policing, port logistics, financial networks, terror designations, military-grade counterintelligence, are mechanical. They scale, they replicate, they outlive the man who learned them. And the girlfriend who unknowingly led the army to a cabin in the mountains, she proved the one thing no empire can engineer away. You can buy weapons, you can buy silence, you can buy time, but you cannot buy your way out of the human need to be near someone when the night gets quiet, and that need leaves footprints. Elmencho didn't betray the systems that touched him. He absorbed every one of them: prison, police, marriage, ports, franchise logistics, took what was useful and weaponized the rest. The only thing that stopped him was the one variable no institution can model and no algorithm can predict: a human heart, a car on a mountain road, a woman who didn't know she was the thread. The state caught the man, but the machine he built is still running, adapting, franchising, waiting for whoever takes the wheel next. And somewhere in the smoke, someone is already studying this takedown the same way Elmencho once studied the inside of an American prison cell. Not as a warning, as a lesson plan. If you want to see what happens when the system meant to stop the cartel starts working for it, a DEA agent goes from $500,000 in debt to a Cartagena mansion using cartel cash he was supposed to seize. Watch Black Files break down exactly how he did it. Click here.